What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action. And we have UFC Vegas 71 this Saturday, featuring a potential 5-round bantamweight main event between former champion Petr Yan and rising prospect Merab Dvalishvili. Super high-level matchup there. I'm very excited for that one. We also have, among these 13 fights, the rescheduled main event from 2 weeks ago that never took place between Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann. This time it's at a catch weight of 215 pounds. So we have some prospect versus prospect matchups here, some fun Dana White Contender Series debuts. Typical sort of thing you'd expect, but the money lines this week have been going pretty wild in opposite directions. So some I jumped on early. I think I have about 5 money lines placed on this card already that I'll point out, and I'm looking to add a couple more that I'm waiting to come down even further in my favor here. So it's one of those weeks where I think I have got a pretty good lead on who's going to win some of these matchups. Less of an eye for the props, in my opinion, and I'm just going to take a shot on a lot of money lines and hope that I come out the victor on the majority of those. So also check out my live stream tomorrow night, Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. I'll be having Monk, aka the Monkmatician, from the MMA Engine. He also has his own YouTube channel as well, where he does DFS content, DraftKings content, and he's a super sharp guy in that arena. We'll be talking, the breakdowns, predictions, and betting content as normal, but I also want to pick Monk's brain about the DFS side of things. I've been dabbling in that for the first time in the past couple of weeks myself, unsuccessfully so far, so maybe Monk can help us out. So hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's break into the first prelim of the night. First fight of the night is at flyweight between Tyson Nam and Bruno Silva. We've got Tyson Nam at 39 years old now at flyweight, who's pretty far past the prime you would expect at the weight class, but still a very powerful Hawaiian boxer, and that's what he's been known for his entire career. It's been a long one with a lot of experience fighting in Elite XC, King of the Cage, even World Series of Fighting, Bellator, all over the place, and now the UFC, where he's not been the most successful, but he's coming off of a knockout win over Ode Osbourne last August at UFC San Diego, I believe the event was. And it was more, capitalizing on the mistake of Ode Osbourne in round 1. Ode executed a perfect flying knee, but it missed by a mile. And upon Ode's landing, he got met with a big right hook from Tyson Nam, put him out cold. So 21 wins, 12 losses, 13 of those 21 wins for Nam are knockouts. And he's only been finished a few times. I think the last time was to Marlon Moraes about 10 years ago. So pretty durable. Not a lot of people want to, crash the pocket against Tyson Nam, especially early when he does his best work. Most of his knockouts are under the 1.5 round mark over his entire career. So he is fighting on a bit of a timer, and his decision equity is not the greatest, right? He's going 7 decision wins, 9 decision losses, and 1 draw. So not the best for flyweight. You really do want that minute winning ability at this weight class. So, without a well-rounded game here, not many opponents I'm gonna pick Tyson Nam over, especially Bruno Silva, who's got the wrestling. He's got the slick in and out movement, the speed, and the youth, being 7 years younger. And Bruno Silva was at really good camps over his career, starting at Black House MMA in Brazil, now at Fight Ready with Henry Cejudo. And we see what kind of advancements, that camp is giving fighters. So coming off of a bit of a layoff is a little tricky here to pick Bruno Silva, but when you consider all of the things that he's got going for him, the speed, the youth, the wrestling, and he's got power in his hands too. We just saw before his layoff, Bruno Silva put out JP Bays and Victor Martinez with very fast and powerful striking. So I'm going to take Bruno Silva here as just a more comprehensive fighter. I got him on the money line at minus 155. That since moved up to around the minus 190 to minus 200 mark, I believe. So about plus 170, the underdog price on Tyson Nam. It's just a puncher's chance for me, and I know that he got that knockout last time over Ode, but if you play that fight back a few times, I just don't think that the majority of the time that result happens unless Ode, is just reckless as he was last August. So give me Bruno Silva to win. I'm going to say by decision here. Moving up a weight class to bantamweight now, we've got Victor Henry versus Tony Gravely, a very closely lined matchup and a very exciting one. And I can see why it's closely lined, because Victor Henry was a massive underdog in a short notice bout against Raoni Barcelos a year ago, and he destroyed Raoni Barcelos, outstriking him at I think 180 significant strikes to 140. They just traded back and forth in the pocket at close range, and Victor Henry won those exchanges and even stuffed all of the takedown attempts of Raoni Barcelos, maybe aside from 1 or 2. Then he followed that up with being a massive favorite, like a minus 400 favorite against Rafael Assuncao, who was on a 4-fight losing streak, many of them finishes at 39 years old. So, the odds makers gave Victor Henry all the respect, and then he fumbled it and ended up getting a counterstruck from Assuncao, the veteran, and decisively lost that, I think 3 rounds to 0. So now they have Victor Henry back right in the middle, not a huge favorite, not a huge underdog. And Tony Gravely is a guy who is a former D1 wrestler, relies on getting that top control time, massive amounts of takedowns. And he does have power in his hands, but he really does rely on the wrestling to set up his strikes. And, if he's forced to stay on his feet for too long, he can slow down and be very low output. His striking is pretty basic, although it is effective. But we saw with Nate Maness versus Tony Gravely that even though Tony Gravely could, knock down Nate Maness, he didn't put him away. Nate Maness got saved by the buzzer, and then Tony Gravely continued to get his takedowns stuffed, and he got knocked out in round 2. So coming off of that loss to Javid Basharat, who's, on a different level. He's a very good prospect with just a fluid skill set between the striking and the wrestling. We saw Tony Gravely have no answers once he did not get that wrestling upside. So Victor Henry, I could see kind of mirroring the game plan of Nate Maness, having pretty good defensive wrestling. We know Victor Henry does have a catch wrestling background, training with Josh Barnett, and he was successful against Tony Barcelos in defending takedowns. And on the regional scene, I've seen mixed results with his defensive grappling, but it's the striking where his skill set really shines. I think Victor Henry's got a much more comprehensive striking game. And I think there's more of a gap between the striking in the favor of Henry than there is a gap in the wrestling in the favor of Gravely. So I will take Victor Henry here. I think he's got a very good shot at just doing the better work, putting more damage in this matchup on Tony Gravely, and just avoiding that constant takedown threat, and especially accelerating as this fight goes on. I think his cardio will certainly hold up more than Gravely's. So give me Victor Henry to win by decision in this matchup. I do have a moneyline bet on Victor Henry at -140. Women's flyweight bout up next between J.J. Aldrich and Ariane Lipski, and this is a bout that has really changed drastically on the money line as the week has gone on. I believe even on Friday or Saturday, I saw J.J. Aldrich around a -200 to -220 favorite. Now she's a -400 on some books over the +300 underdog Ariane Lipski. A pretty wide money line there, but I can see a lot of red flags on the side of Ariane Lipski. For one, even at 29 years old, she just faced Priscilla Cachoeira last summer, and within like a minute of round 1, she got knocked out on the feet, marking her 4th TKO loss in her career, her 3rd in the UFC. So her durability is not looking great these days, especially when you consider that she can get grounded pretty easily, and that's where she's met her end by TKO by Montana De La Rosa, Antonina Shevchenko. As soon as they can get her down and she's on the defensive on the mat, they rain down ground and pound on her and she tastes her own blood. It's pretty much over. So not the best durability for the former KSW champion and a good Muay Thai fighter. Offensively, Lipski is pretty strong, pretty technical. She can counter-strike effectively and wobble her opponents, but she's got victories over some pretty low-level names. UFC fighters that have found themselves at the big stage, but back in KSW, she defeated Diana Belbita, Silvana Gomez Juarez, and now she even got a knee bar over Luana Carolina in the UFC. But Ariane Lipski, again, it's a limited skill set. She's got the striking on the feet, and she doesn't wear damage that well these days. J.J. Aldrich, I think she absorbs damage quite well. She is coming off of that guillotine loss in round 2 to Erin Blanchfield, which is not aging the worst as a loss now. You see what Erin Blanchfield has been doing recently. And J.J. Aldrich has that Taekwondo and BJJ foundation to her game. She's got pretty good takedown offense, which will be the path of least resistance here against Lipski. So not the best finishing potential from J.J. Aldrich. I think she's got like 2 knockouts in her career, no submissions, just grinding out her opponents. I think she's like 9-2 in decision results. So very good there, but she could actually find herself with another TKO victory in this matchup if she can ground Lipski and employ some of that ground and pound. But more often than not, I could see her getting another decision win here. I just see so many advantages in the cardio, the durability, and just the overall ability to dictate where this fight takes place. So give me Aldrich by decision here ultimately, but with the -400 price tag on her, I can't get there betting-wise. Another wide money line up next between Guido Cannetti and Mario Bautista. At bantamweight, we've got Mario Bautista a -1,000 favorite over Guido Cannetti, the +600, +650 underdog. And it sort of makes sense when you look at this matchup as a whole. 29-year-old Mario Bautista improving, getting better. He's on a 3-fight winning streak and only slipping up to Corey Sandhagen by submission in his debut and getting counterstruck moving forward against Trevin Jones. Trevin Jones, his shining moment basically in the UFC was that one knockout over Bautista. But since then, Bautista has righted that wrong with the round 1 submission over Benito Lopez last time. Brian Kelleher, round 1 submission as well, and a dominant decision over Jay Perrin. Guido Cannetti, 43 years old. This guy's the second oldest fighter on the entire roster behind Andrei Arlovsky. I'm pretty sure that's correct. And, a 10-6 record overall, not the greatest record. 4 knockouts and 4 submissions for Guido Cannetti, who has only been knocked out 1 time. I think that was against Dana Batgari. But, that's just the kind of fighter that Guido Cannetti is, a very loose, relaxed counter-striker at this point who baits his opponents in, moving on the outside of the octagon, feints his way in range, tries to get you to overcommit where you can counter-strike effectively. And he's still very powerful and very slick, but again, at 43 years old, the durability is going to be fading, the speed and reaction time is going to be fading, and he is coming off of 2 back-to-back victories in round 1 over Randy Costa, who's not a great fighter, one of the most kill or be killed fighters we've ever seen, and Chris Moutinho, who's one of the worst fighters we've ever seen on the roster as well. Guido Cannetti was able to slug it out against Chris Moutinho against the cage, and I think it was a standing TKO stoppage in round 1. So those are the 2 victories that Guido Cannetti's had recently. It was 3 losses in a row before those 2 that he dispatched of. So Mario Bautista should win this matchup. It just should be a matter of when he does it, how quickly and what method he does it, because he's had a pretty soft schedule lately. Jay Perrin, I think, was on short notice. Brian Kelleher, a decent fighter, and then Benito Lopez returning after a long layoff. So, this is another spot where I would be expecting somebody a little bit better in competition than Guido Cannetti. So they must really expect Bautista to put on another highlight reel performance here, and that's what it's going to take for him to move up and be taken seriously at bantamweight. So I think he does get the club and sub victory probably in round 1. Hits Cannetti with something. Cannetti has the hands down, the very loose, relaxed style. I think Bautista lands something devastating and then locks up a submission in round 1. So, I'm not even sure what the props are with Mario Bautista inside the distance. The under 1.5, maybe ways to play this, but it could be dicey at the light weight class here. But I expect another highlight reel from Bautista. Middleweight bout up next between Cedrikas Dumas and Josh Fremd. A pretty exciting matchup between 2 very big for the weight class young middleweights here. We've got the 7-0 Cedrikas Dumas. Pretty good kickboxer with power in his hands and his feet, and an opportunistic submission game. We saw him get a round 1 guillotine choke, I think under a minute. Kind of a club and sub victory by guillotine last August on the Contenders Series against a fellow 7-0 undefeated prospect, a fellow kickboxer in Matej Peñas. So that was a pretty good way to burst onto the scene and get your contract to the UFC for Dumas. But overall, the guy's got a very limited resume, not a lot of high-level opponents on that. In fact, many of them had losing records or 1 or 2 fights. And the one guy that had a fleshed-out record of a 9-5 record, he took to a decision. So, I can see Dumas getting a little bit too comfortable in his power, a little bit too comfortable jumping on the grappling side of things. And, I could see him getting reversed in positions where we've seen Josh Fremd have success in the past. Josh Fremd does have a good wrestling and submission base and very good power in his hands and feet as well. We saw him knock out several opponents in the LFA where he went 4-1. His one loss was to Gregory Rodriguez, where he got knocked out for the only time on his career record. So I saw decent BJJ and scrambles against Hernandez, even on a short notice. He did probably win round 2 just by getting the reversal there, matching Hernandez in the striking. And he was winning against Tresean Gore the last time we saw him before getting his neck pretty much snapped in half by Tresean Gore in that guillotine loss. So I think there's a little bit of a recency bias when you consider that Cedrikas Dumas is the -180 favorite here, having a lot of impressive victories over basically nobody, and looking very athletic and fast, don't get me wrong, but Josh Fremd also looks powerful, and he's a pretty good mover as well, and he's the +155 underdog here, training at Factory X Muay Thai. So for me, not having seen potential, finishing potential at the UFC level from either guy, I've seen very little cage time from Dumas overall. And I could see a lot of spots where Josh Fremd could exploit the grappling errors in Cedric Dumas's game if he gets overly excited in his debut here. So overall, I'm just not sold on Dumas yet. I'm not ready to get in the way of him betting-wise, and I'm not going to put down a moneyline bet on Josh Fremd, but I will pick him as an underdog. I just think this fight should be closer to 50-50, so give me the dog here, the guy who's actually made his debut in the UFC before, tussled a couple of times with UFC-level competition, and even at 29 years old for Josh Fremd, I could see some improvements from him. Again, he's big for the weight class, so he's going to match the size and reach pretty much of Dumas here. And if he can stay safe and drag this fight late, I think the match will kind of turn into his favor. So early under 1.5 rounds, I would probably favor the finishing potential of Dumas. But as this fight goes late, as we see some grappling, and we also have, knockout power on the Josh Fremd side as well. So give me Josh Fremd as an underdog. Not my most confident pick, but I think the money line should be closer. Another bantamweight bout up next between Rafael Assuncao and Davy Grant. Two guys that are past their prime here at bantamweight, but it should be a fun fight between the 40-year-old Rafael Assuncao and the 37-year-old Davy Grant. Closely lined money line here. We've got minus 140, the slight favorite on Davy Grant. Plus 120, the slight underdog on Assuncao. And Assuncao is coming off of a victory that snapped a 4-fight losing streak against Victor Henry, who we talked about earlier on this card. And Victor Henry really gave Assuncao the perfect fight for him and his style, which is being a low-volume counter-striker who has the ability to get some good clinch work in, score some takedowns, not really hold down his opponents for any significant period of time, but still land them and mix things up in all facets of the game. But again, not being very high output. But against Victor Henry, it was just the perfect punches landed at the perfect time that defined all 3 rounds, and he got a unanimous decision victory over a very good opponent. So I don't see that happening from Davy Grant, who is very good at moving quickly in and out of range and just smothering his opponents with high output striking with sort of a reckless abandon for his own safety. He's making every fight close, which is part of the exciting nature of Davy Grant and why he's scored, I think, like 4 either fight of the night or performance of the night bonuses out of his last 5 fights. He got the knockout over Luis Smolka the last time we saw him. He got a very close split decision loss to Adrian Yanez, who's one of the better boxers, so to speak, of the division. Scored pretty well in the fight against Marlon Chito Vera in the rematch. And before that, he knocked out Jonathan Martinez and Martin Day. So this guy's still got power in his hands, Davy Grant. He's got a pretty good ability, like I said, to just go, and he's got the motor to keep going for 3 rounds. Assuncao's going to fade, and he's going to fade pretty harshly under the pressure of Davy Grant. So I got to go with Davy Grant in this matchup all day. He's the type of fighter you definitely want to bet on, in my opinion. And the money line started off a little bit higher, like minus 160, minus 170 for Davy Grant. It's since come down, so I'm pretty comfortable betting this around some books I'm seeing around like minus 133 on BetOnline at this point. So I'm ready to put that bet in right now. Probably around 1.5 units I would put at like minus 133 on Davy Grant, who I just think can either get a late finish or a decision win in this bout. I mean, Rafael Assuncao, like I said, he was given the matchup he needed. Somebody in Victor Henry who was confident to stand right in the pocket and exchange blow for blow with Assuncao and get the worst end of it. Davy Grant is not going to be that guy. He's going to just throw everything at Assuncao, trying to knock him out, and he damn well might do it. So give me Davy Grant here. I just really think his pace and pressure is going to be way too much for Assuncao. Heavyweight bout up next between 2 Dana White Contender Series alumni in Lucas Brzeski and Carl Williams. Brzeski we saw make his debut last summer unsuccessfully in a split decision loss to Martin Buday. Even though Brzeski, I think, outstruck him like maybe double on significant strikes over 3 rounds, they still gave it to Martin Buday. I think Brzeski deserved to get his hand raised that night, but otherwise he did get a round 3 rear naked choke on the Contender Series a couple seasons ago. Carl Williams just came off of last season's Contender Series, a 3-round decision win, dominant over the favored to win Penn State wrestler and Jimmy Lawson, who I think outweighed Carl Williams by over 30 pounds. Carl Williams is a former 205-pounder, but he weighed in at 233 against the 266-pound Jimmy Lawson. Still ragdolled him around and outpaced him, outstruck him on the ground and pound to a dominant win. And Carl Williams does that in the regional tape I saw as well. He's got very fast boxing, good in and out movement, and never really gets himself out of position when he does throw in powerful combination, but he does love the grappling. His takedown offense is very strong. He trains at American top team Lima, I believe, and Lucas Brzeski kind of has some of the similar tendencies, just not as refined. Lucas Brzeski has some striking output that's pretty powerful, but when he gets hit defensively, it's hard to watch. He did have one bout earlier on. His only knockout loss was in like 30 seconds. He got dropped by a couple of jabs and just brutally finished in that fight. And even since then, whenever he finds himself on the defensive strikes, he can get rocked pretty easily, but he does use that takedown offense to bail himself out of those situations. Now, over a low level of competition, that might work. I don't think it's going to work against Carl Williams, who probably has better cardio, better striking, and better wrestling. So I do favor Carl Williams, and so do the odds makers. They've got Williams at minus 200 on the money line, plus 170 for Brzeski. Now, this could get hairy early on because I do believe Brzeski is the bigger, true heavyweight stature-wise. He is 6'4". The measurables don't look that different on paper, but I think Carl Williams is the smaller statured, like I said, former light heavyweight here. So staying at heavyweight for his debut, it could get hairy trying to take down Brzeski, but I think Brzeski's going to overswing. He does swing wildly. He looked a little bit more refined against Budai, which is why he won that match on the Contender Series. Brzeski might have been trying to make an impression on the boss and, get an exciting highlight reel knockout. He looked more refined in his debut, but I still think it's going to be a little bit sloppy, a little bit slow, and I think Carl Williams can get this fight to the mat and employ ground and pound, maybe get a victory inside the distance, maybe not. I'm going to call Williams by decision. I like his money line at minus 190, moving closer to minus 200. We're not getting a whole lot of value. Like I said, this could get hairy early on, but I think if this goes late, Williams' cardio and pace will take over and win the bout. Another battle between two Dana White Contender Series alumni up next. This time it's at 205 pounds. Light heavyweight bout between Vitor Petrino making his debut against Anton Turkalj, the pleasure man who's making his second walk to the UFC cage. The first time Turkalj made his appearance in the UFC was on short notice against Jailton Almeida. I think Shamil Abdurakhimov had pulled out of that bout, so in stepped Anton Turkalj on short notice. He had that pretty impressively dominant Dana White Contender Series appearance where he out-grappled Acacio dos Santos, I think scoring like 11 takedowns in that bout, but it wasn't, like a statement performance that Dana White was looking for. Wasn't very exciting the way that the Pleasure Man had promised it would be. So they didn't give him a contract that night. The 26-year-old had to make his debut in the UFC against Jailton Almeida, which is usually a suicide mission for most people so far. Round one rear naked choke loss for Turkalj, who did have some success, trying to stave off getting taken to the ground immediately, but he was ultimately finished there. Anton Turkalj is quite a character. He sort of has dollar store version Johnny Walker vibes as far as how unorthodox he is, while still being powerful and dangerous. Right before the Dana White Contender Series in Brave CF, you could see him throw, I think it was like a missed head kick into a spinning back fist, which knocked his opponent out cold within a few seconds of the match. So things like that, you've seen Johnny Walker do in the UFC before. I think against Justin Ledette, it really reminded me of that knockout. But Anton Turkalj is no joke on the ground. His grappling is pretty good. He can get the fight there pretty, efficiently and always end up somehow in top position, advancing position to mount. He's got good ground and pound and some submission skill as well. He's got 5 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 1-0 in decisions that make up his 8 wins. That one loss, his only loss, is to Jailton Almeida in his debut last time out. So Vitor Petrino, 7-0, power striking Brazilian. This is a pick'em price tag matchup right now, minus 110 apiece. And the biggest win for Vitor Petrino was actually against the UFC veteran Gazimuradov Antigulov in the UAE Warriors. That was on the cusp of Antigulov getting cut from the UFC off of like a 4-fight finish loss streak. He ate one more finish loss to Vitor Petrino in round 2, I think that was. Both guys were pretty tired, but it's Petrino with those powerful strikes. And although they're technical, and Vitor's a very built, powerful guy, it starts to be the case where he gasses out. You really got to wind up and charge those strikes and sort of attack in blitz sequences. And that's how he beat Rodolfo Bellato on the Contender Series as well, a guy he'd previously beaten in the past. Petrino does have the finishing ability, but finishing 6 of his 7 victories here, I just don't know how he's going to perform late in a fight, especially against a guy who can push the grappling pace like Anton Turkalj. And Petrino really keeps his chin up in the air. He's got that jacked Brazilian, undefeated confidence and swagger about him where he marches forward and just has no qualms about, really making his offense his defense, so to speak. So I see a lot of holes in the game. I did get on Anton Turkalj a little bit early. I put a unit on his money line at plus 115. I just really think that he's got the better cardio and the better skill set in this matchup. He can match the power with more of a non-traditional, non-technical striking output. But he could also take this fight to the mat and wear out the gas tank of Petrino, which I think will drain rather quickly. So it's going to be a little bit of a nail-biter early for sure. Anton Turkalj can be 50-50 as far as his antics go. Like I mentioned, spinning back fists, keeping his chin exposed in the air and just being reckless. But I think if he can avoid that early power of Vitor Petrino, he can win this match inside the distance down the stretch. So give me Anton Turkalj to pull off the upset here as the underdog. High-level bantamweight bout up next between Said Nurmagomedov and Jonathan Martinez. Both guys with pretty impressive pro records, and both are on 4-fight winning streaks. So it's a pretty important matchup for both guys who are still very young, 28 for Martinez and 30 for Said Nurmagomedov. And you hear Nurmagomedov, he is Dagestani, but not part of that Khabib clan. This guy is more of a creative and powerful striker, loves the spinning attacks, but also does have grappling as well. Good at locking up those front chokes as we saw against Cody Stamann a year ago, and most recently against Saidikub Romanov, modifying that guillotine choke in round 2 and getting the job done. And I think there are some tricks up the sleeve of Said, grappling-wise, that we still have yet to see. This guy can be pretty low volume and just rely on big, round-defining moments and sometimes the finishing potential of his strikes, the club and sub potential. But I think there's a lot more to see from his takedown offense, the clinch work as well. He's very strong there. Deceivingly strong in the clinch is Said. And Jonathan Martinez is a very high-output technical kickboxer who uses those kicks as really some good weapons to maintain distance, not let people get in too close on him. But I think those are going to open up some opportunities for the takedown from Nurmagomedov here. And Nurmagomedov is a very good kicker as well. So you're going to see some slick in and out movement of Nurmagomedov, good lateral movement as well. Jonathan Martinez more of that slow plodding Muay Thai type of striker. But, this is a good matchup here, and the money line could be closer the way it is now. We're looking at like minus 230 for Nurmagomedov, plus 185 for Martinez. And I took a bet on Nurmagomedov on his money line at minus 175. I thought that was a fair price with a little bit of value on it. I just value the finishing potential and the better quality of his opponents he's beaten. We're looking at knocking out Mark Striegel, subbing Cody Stamann, getting having to dig deep and get that decision victory over Douglas Silva de Andrade, who's a tough competitor, and then subbing Romanov last time out. Whereas Jonathan Martinez is getting the TKO stoppage over an aged Cub Swanson, decision over Vince Morales, who would never wrestle him, getting the decision over Alejandro Perez, again, who gave Martinez trouble with some big moments, a couple of round-defining strikes and knockdowns. And then before that, it was against Zviad Lazashvili, who was like a one-and-done, I think a short-notice grappler who gassed out early in that bout. So not the best level of competition for Martinez, but there's a couple of gripes for Nurmagomedov. One, he's not as high output as Martinez striking-wise, and then he can lack the urgency sometimes, often giving up round 2 after a strong start in round 1, and then having to reel in the victory in round 3. So hopefully we don't see that. Hopefully we see more of the spots where I have gripes on Martinez, right? Giving up those round-defining moments after doing a lot of quality work. Sometimes Martinez can just be a little bit lazy as far as his defense goes, and I think that's going to be where Said takes over, and I think we do see a lot more grappling from Nurmagomedov here as well, capitalizing on the kicking offense of Martinez, getting in range and working the clinch game. So give me a Nurmagomedov here to just have a more comprehensive game and mix in some more grappling than we've seen in the past. So Nurmagomedov by decision is the pick. Featherweight bout up next between Ricardo Ramos and Austin Lingo. This is a pretty simple breakdown in my opinion. It's been a bit since we've seen Austin Lingo in the UFC. I think almost a year and a half since he passed his test against Luis Saldana perfectly, weathering the early storm of Saldana where he's the most dangerous, and then taking over as Saldana fades, as we've learned he tends to do. And Austin Lingo has a come-forward pressure style, mostly a one-dimensional, almost like just a boxer as far as his skill set is concerned. He does have a Taekwondo and Muay Thai background, but just pretty much a striker. And he was able to put Saldana in all sorts of trouble late in that fight. Even in round 3, I think he dropped him pretty brutally. So, he's had a couple of matches scheduled with David Onama and Jonathan Pierce. Pulling out of both of those matches recently, I don't blame him for that. It's a pretty limited skill set for Austin Lingo compared to that of Ricardo Ramos, who's only 27 years old, 16-4 for the Brazilian, who's got a well-rounded array of skills, good Muay Thai, very good movement, and he's a BJJ black belt primarily as well. He's like a grappler first, but he's got a very loose, creative striking style as well. So I think he's coming off of that spinning elbow knockout, his second in the UFC, and this one was over Danny Chavez. The first one, I think, was over Ayman Sahabi. So, really well-timed spinning attacks, good in-and-out movement, and a good, wrestling base as well to take the fight to the mat where he can then threaten submissions. He's got a slick back take, and he can even attack chokes against the cage from a standing position as well. So I think Austin Lingo is in a lot of trouble in this matchup, and the sportsbooks agree. He's like a minus 350 favorite is Ramos, about plus 260 the underdog price on Austin Lingo. Being so comfortable and improving everywhere, and I think Ramos trains at Team Alpha Male as well, so his wrestling and takedown offense is only going to get better to complement his BJJ game. So I'm going to take Ricardo Ramos to get a submission in this matchup over Austin Lingo somewhere in the stretch of the fight. I'm not sure if he'll rush things or if Austin Lingo will put up too much of a fight before he wears down, but I like Ricardo Ramos pretty much everywhere here. Now, he can carry his hands low, and Austin Lingo does come forward and pressure and throw bombs, but as long as Ramos can avoid that threat of the power, I think he wins this matchup inside the distance. Up next, we have Ryan Spann taking on Nikita Krylov. This is now a catchweight bout at 215 pounds. It was a 205-pound bout just 2 weeks ago, headlining a card, so it would have been 5 rounds. Now it's only 3 rounds of a fight. And I had a bet on Nikita Krylov that night. It got voided. I will not be replacing that bet because sometimes, just superstition-wise, if the bet gets pulled and the bout gets rescheduled, sometimes I see that as a sign that the MMA betting gods are looking out for me. Maybe that would have been a losing bet, but stylistically and just prediction-wise, I still pick Nikita Krylov to win. You can check out my full card breakdown from a couple weeks ago on Krylov versus Spann, just for further details there. But overall, I like the grappling, and I like the fact that Nikita Krylov can move into the later parts of a fight and still have the pace and cardio to perform, whereas Ryan Spann has seen nothing but round 1 results for his last 5 fights. The last time he went past round 1, it was a split decision result to Sam Alvey. So, take that what you will. But he was knocked out by Johnny Walker in round 1. He was submitted, club and subbed by Anthony Lionheart Smith in round 1. And the other victories were over Misha Serkinov, who's, the durability is not the best these days. Dominic Reyes most recently, who I think most people could knock out. And Ian Cutelaba, who had success on Ryan Spann, but ultimately got caught up in that guillotine, moving in recklessly the way that Ian Cutelaba does. So Ryan Spann is huge for the weight class, still pretty young at 31 years old, and can, without a doubt, get a round 1 either knockout or club and sub victory here. And this being a 3-round fight instead of a 5-round fight, now he's got more of a chance to survive until the end of the fight and make it to the scorecards. Whereas in a 5-round fight, I just really don't think there's most worlds where he does that. So I'm still going to favor the fight doesn't go to decision here. I'm still going to favor Nikita Krylov inside the distance. I just think that Krylov has faced a lot more fast starters and succeeded against them more than Ryan Spann has faced good grapplers and succeeded against them. So especially a durable one in Nikita Krylov, who's only been knocked out 1 time. So, again, the sickness is very sketchy for Krylov, but I can't hold that against him. Prediction-wise, I got to look up the matchup ahead of me here and just stick with my initial lean, which is Krylov by submission, somewhere in round 2 or round 3 of this bout. Up next in our co-main event, we've got a heavyweight bout between Alexander Volkov and Alexander Romanov. This is a striker versus grappler matchup in every sense. We've got Volkov being the Russian Muay Thai striker, and Alexander Romanov, the Moldovan savage grappler with one track mind, and that's to get this fight to the mat and rain down ground and pound and maybe look for a submission as well. And he's been successful so far. Romanov is now 5-1 in the UFC. His only professional loss coming in his last bout against Marcin Tybura. A pretty close decision. You know, it could have been a draw. That round 1 was certainly a 10-8, and that is how Romanov fights. He comes pretty fast in round 1, throws his opponents around the mat like they're children, but then he doesn't leave any gas or cardio for the remaining parts of the fight. So he's very round 1 dependent as far as getting the submission or the ground and pound, and he's been able to do that against guys like Rocky Martinez, Marcos de Lima, Jared Vandera, and Chase Sherman. But listen to the level of competition. I mean, that's very, very low. Those are the bottom of the barrel heavyweights. The two guys that gave him trouble were Juan Espino, who's pretty good, and Marcin Tybura. So a pretty well-timed low blow from Juan Espino was able to give Romanov a way out to get that technical decision against Juan Espino. And last time out against Marcin Tybura, he ended up losing the fight by decision after gassing out. So Volkov is a guy I think can really challenge the ability to hold his opponent down for Romanov. I think Volkov has faced quite a big variety of opponents now where he can, he's proven himself as far as his get-up ability. He faced Curtis Blades, who took him down 14 times, had trouble holding down Volkov every step of the way, and Volkov even won round 4, showing very good cardio in that fight. And, ultimately it was the best wrestler in the UFC, so he lost that bout to Blades. He also fought Fabricio Verdum years ago in a 5-round bout, actually able to challenge that get-up ability as well and outstrike Verdum after he faded later into round 4 and got that knockout win against him. But he's also fought grapplers like Roy Nelson way back in the day, not the best wrestler, but same with Stefan Struve, a grappler, not a great wrestler. But he stayed safe against those guys. Tom Aspinall most recently is the guy last year who gave him trouble, mauled him, took him down in round 1 and got that armbar on the mat. So I'm not going to compare Tom Aspinall to Alexander Romanov. I think they're in completely separate conversations. But my point is that Volkov has showed a very good ability to wall walk on the cage, have a pretty good guard, like a good active guard, good butterfly hooks, and use those long limbs to really post up and get back to his feet and start striking. And he's got good cardio as well. He never wears out. So the 5-round experience, 13 UFC bouts where he's gone 9-4, and just a way better striking game. I got to take Volkov for the plus money here. I got him for 1 unit at plus 142 on his money line on BetOnline when that peaked. It's still around like plus 135, I think, on a lot of books. I like it. It's a dangerous proposition. You got to expect that Volkov has to endure a very dangerous round 1. But if he could do that and go into round 2 and round 3, I think he could even get a round 3 stoppage when Romanov gasses out, inevitably. But there are a lot of questions to be answered in this matchup. I'm going to take the stab on the plus money, the more UFC tenured guy, the guy with the better striking output, and the guy with the better cardio I'm banking on here to survive round 1. But yeah, there is a spot here where we've seen Volkov dominated by some of the best grapplers in the game right now in Aspinall and Curtis Blades, and we've seen Romanov destroy more of the low-level end of the heavyweight division. So there's some room for these two to meet in the middle. Maybe Romanov can defeat Volkov in round 1, but I'm going to bank on that plus money and take the underdog shot here. Give me Volkov by a round 3 TKO stoppage. Okay, we've made it to the main event of the fight card. This is the former bantamweight champion and Petr Yan taking on Merab Dvalishvili, the Georgian weaponized cardio wrestling machine. And this is a very fun matchup. I like both guys quite a bit. Both excellent fighters. And Petr Yan is 16-4 as a professional. Merab Dvalishvili similarly is 15-4. 8-fight win streak for Merab, and Petr Yan kind of the opposite story. He's lost 3 of his last 4 bouts. I mean, you could forgive a few of those, though. Razor close split decision loss to Sean O'Malley in October. I scored that for Peter Yan, but I could see the subjective scoring. I could see how you score that for Sean O'Malley for sure. It kind of came down to round 1 in that bout. Aljamain Sterling before that, very close 5-round split decision loss to Aljamain Sterling. And 2 fights before that, he had lost to Aljamain after dominating him up until that round 4 illegal knee. So his record could look drastically different in a not-so-distant universe for Peter Yan. And the Russian striker has very few flaws in his game. His defensive wrestling is strong, offensive wrestling is strong, and the way that he times his strikes is phenomenal. I mean, he does a good job of reading his opponents in round 1, taking that little bit of time to data collect, and then he has very good pull counters, good forward pressure, not wasting any movement. You know, he's very efficient with how he uses his energy, whereas Merab Dvalishvili is all forward pressure, and he can be hittable. So I think that Peter Yan is going to not take too long to time the movements of Merab Dvalishvili, use the very good balance and takedown defense, and against the cage, I think Merab is going to try to stall out Peter Yan, but Peter Yan's very good and crafty at maintaining his balance, circling off the cage, grabbing the wrists of his opponents, and setting up traps like those knees in the clinch, good elbows in the clinch, body strikes, and his boxing is very strong as well. So I just see the bigger moments coming from Petr Yan, and he's not always the highest output of a striker, but what he lands are very accurate and they count. So even though he's like a moment winner for Petr Yan, he does it time and time again. He wins those moments that he needs to. I find it very hard to find Merab Dvalishvili stalling out and stalemating the majority of this fight over 5 rounds. Merab, even though he's known for his cardio, weaponized cardio at that, that's in 3-round fights. He's never been in a 5-round fight, and even in 3-rounders, he does slow down. So even though he can keep going, we've seen Merab, the script flipped on him. We've seen him taken down as well when he gets tired. We've seen him get more hittable and more desperate for those, not so sneaky takedowns when he gets tired. So I could see Petr Yan countering that with knees, countering that with some very slick boxing. And I just see the better moments being racked up for Petr Yan, who could probably finish this somewhere down the stretch of the fight as well. Maybe looking at the 4-5 decision prop for Petr Yan when that opens up might not be too bad of a strategy. So yeah, I might look at the round 4, round 5 finishing props for Petr Yan, maybe sprinkle on that. I think he could end the fight within those championship rounds, if not just winning a decisive victory. So I did hit the money line for a few units on Petr Yan at minus 220. I know that since moved up to around like minus 250 or so. I still like it. I see very few worlds where Merab Dvalishvili can stalemate this matchup or employ a wrestling game plan for the majority of 5 rounds. I'd be very shocked. I think the defensive grappling of Petr Yan and just his ability to land the better strikes on the breaks of the clinch are going to pile up here, and I think his speed and cardio is going to actually outdo that of Merab's. So give me Petr Yan pretty confidently. I think he's going to show why he was the former bantamweight champion here. So there you have it, you guys. All 13 fights broken down for this weekend's UFC card. UFC Vegas 71, Yan versus Dvalishvili. Should be a fun time. Remember to join me for my live stream on Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Central Time with the Monk Matician as we talk about this card in greater detail. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and I will talk to you guys very soon. Cheers.